All right, today we're going to be learning a technique that I use for this painting called underpainting with glazing, and I'm using acrylic paint. So in order to get started, we're just going to start off with a sketch. So here I'm just, you see my reference picture is my dog Ratchet, and sorry, this blurry thing will be gone in a minute, but yeah, so you start off with just like a sketch. You can make it as detailed or as rough as you need it to be. I'm just going to start off with a rough sketch just because I don't feel like I need that much detail, so, but you do want to know where everything's going to go. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my underpainting. So here I already had, someone had poured out a lot of brown paint, so I was just going to use brown paint so I didn't waste it. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to water down the paint. So here I have my acrylic. You can see I have two different palettes, or two different holes. One has watered down paint, one has solid paint. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to establish all my darkest areas, and I'm going to paint up all my darkest areas first. Now notice that as I'm painting, that the color gets a little bit lighter. That's because I'm just letting my brush run out of paint, and then I'm doing a technique called dry brushing, to where you're just using the paint that's on the paintbrush without dipping it back in order to make it to where it's lighter. Here you can see I'm adding water directly to the paintbrush in order to get lighter textures and tones. So here you can see that nose, in order to get that dark color and that light color, I watered down the paint. Finger painting is totally acceptable. Just make sure you're keeping it clean. But so here you can see I'm continuing to add my underpainting. I'm looking for the major shadows in the picture. And it's helpful if you're looking at your picture in black and white instead of color, if you have a hard time identifying values and hues. So notice that I've messed up a couple times. As you're painting, feel free to just paint over. It's totally fine. You can have a thing of white, which I will be going back in with white here in just a second. But I like to do just all of my underpainting with just one flat tone, looking for those shadows and those darker areas as I'm painting, and then going back and darkening them up with a thicker coat of paint in those dark areas. So here you can see my palette. I got a little bit of white paint, and then I got a few different other colors for later for my glazing. So here what I'm doing before I glaze, I'm going to go back in and add any white highlights or any white textures that I might have accidentally got too much darkness on before I glaze. Making sure that all of your highlights and your whites are very bright will help you in the glazing process. So once I am satisfied with all of my whites, then I am ready to start glazing. So in order to glaze, you're going to first need to have your colors. So here you can see I'm wanting to have kind of like a light bluish cream color. So I'm mixing up my colors first, and then I'm going to water them down like crazy. That way they're thinner. So notice this, the center part is my main color, and then I'm going to create a watery down piece off to the side. So off to the side, notice that I'm adding a lot more water and stirring it in with the paint that's on the brush, and I'm just going to paint over it. Don't be scared. At first, it's going to look like it's too solid. Keep spreading the paint out without dipping it back into the paint, and you'll notice that you can see the previous color through just a little bit. And as you're spreading it, if you want it to be lighter, just add water. It's almost like you're watercoloring at this point. So notice that I keep bringing my brush up to the top of the page. My water bucket is up there. So I'm just adding more water in the areas that I want lighter, which you can leave some areas just pure white if you want to. So notice in the darker areas where I want to cover that brown more, I'm adding the thicker paint, and then I'm just adding some more water to help thin out that paint. Continue adding coats and layers until you are satisfied with the color. Now I actually want my under painting to show through a little bit, so I'm not completely covering it. If you don't want your under painting to show through, you don't have to. So here I'm coming in with a secondary color. I want it to look kind of like bright, so I'm adding some yellow that I'm then going to tone down with some whites. So notice that I'm really watering down that yellow. I don't want that yellow super intense. And here you can see that I'm adding a watery white on top of the yellow in order to kind of glaze it so that it dulls down that yellow just a little bit. White is one of the hardest things to paint because you don't want it to be just pure white. You want to add like different colors. Now on here, notice this, very important. Notice that I added the darker color, and then before it dried, I am adding water and pulling it up in order to make it fade. Anytime that you want to fade, just be sure to paint really quickly. Don't let the paint dry, otherwise you'll have to go back over it again, and you might mess up the overall look, so you have to paint back over it. So I usually save black or anything dark for the very last. I actually try to avoid using black because it's too intense, but if you are going to use a dark color like a black, do that the final color, okay? Like, try not to add too much black at the start, because otherwise it'll make it really hard to match your values. So here I'm pretty satisfied with the overall look, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the background yellow so it kind of blends in with that highlight on his fur. And then to finalize it, I'm going to go back in with some pure whites in order to add a couple highlights in some areas where I wanted it to pop a little bit more. And once I'm satisfied with the overall look, then I can call my painting done. All right, so I'm going to show you my palette really quick. So I didn't pour out very much. I just poured out a few drops of different colors, and I did pour out a little bit too much black, so I can always save that for later. But the great thing about this technique is you don't have to use a lot of paint because you're watering down most of it. So please make sure you don't pour out too much, okay? All right, so that pretty much concludes it. Notice that if you look closely at it, you can still see some of that underpainting. I personally love that look. It gives it a layered effect, which is pretty cool in my opinion. But yeah, so good luck painting. And if you have any questions about how to do this technique, or if you get stuck, just find me and ask me, and I'll be more than happy to help you. Best of luck, and I would love to see what you make. Good luck.